My mother-in-law kicked me out of her house because she disapproved of my decision to give birth at my parents' home. Without allowing me to even change out of my pajamas or put on shoes, she forcibly removed me from the house. With only my phone, I quickly called my mom, who was nearby, and waited for her at a local diner. When my mom and sister heard what had happened, they were furious. They wasted no time taking action, setting off a chain of events that would soon cause serious trouble for both my mother-in-law and my husband. My name is Clara, and I'm 29 years old. I married Mark, who's 31. Just a year ago, Mark's father owns a large company, and Mark is being groomed to take over as CEO. He's gaining experience by working at one of their smaller branches. We met at work, but I didn't fully realize the scale of his family's business empire until just before our wedding. Mark had never mentioned his role as the future CEO, which caught me by surprise. He was confident, well-liked, and once he explained everything, it made sense. Suddenly, I was swept up in the role of a future CEO's wife. After our wedding, Mark moved to the main company office while I stayed at my job. His father seemed supportive, telling me, "I hear you're quite the leader at work, keep it up." But my mother-in-law, Linda, didn't feel the same. Why would a wife neglect her home for a job? She often questioned. She was adamantly opposed to my career. At first, I thought living separately from Mark's parents would minimize any conflict. I believed that the physical distance would allow us to maintain peace. But I was wrong. Soon, Mark's parents suggested we all live together, and that's when the real trouble began. Mark's father, who was always busy, mentioned how helpful it would be for me to manage the household. Mark liked the idea as well. "I've always lived here, and I'm worried about Mom. Moving out wouldn't work for me," he explained. I felt cornered and unable to say no. During dinner one evening, when they discussed the arrangement, Linda asked pointedly, "Since we all think it's a good idea, Clara, do you have any objections?" Feeling pressured, I reluctantly agreed to move in. Once we were under the same roof, the challenges started immediately. Linda, already against my job, made life miserable. She insisted I quit my job and take over all household chores. Despite me working full-time, she scrutinized my cleaning efforts, demanding I redo tasks over small faults like a speck of dust or a stray hair. At first, I tried to tolerate her criticisms, thinking that if I was more thorough, it would keep her content, but her demands grew. She started checking impossible-to-reach places, like behind the TV or under heavy furniture, which I found unreasonable. I remember one night clearly, exhausted after a long workday. I was looking forward to a quiet evening, but as soon as I stepped through the door, Linda stormed up to me, broom in hand like a weapon. "Clara, the space behind the fridge is dusty. Move it and clean it now," she barked. I was stunned. "Linda, I just got back from work. Can it wait until the weekend?" I asked, trying to stay calm. Her voice rose. "No, it can't. You are the wife, and this house is your responsibility. I won't tolerate laziness." I had reached my limit. "I can't deep clean every day. I work just like Mark. I'll clean properly on weekends," I replied firmly. Furious, Linda screamed, "How dare you speak back to me like that?" She immediately called Mark, twisting the story to make it seem as if I had yelled at her. With dramatic tears, she exaggerated my calm remarks into a full confrontation. I had hoped Mark would defend me, but instead, he said, "Why did you upset Mom like that? She was just trying to help." His lack of support shattered my hopes for understanding. From that moment, I realized I was alone in this fight. Linda's relentless complaints continued, and Mark always sided with her. To avoid conflict, I began to withdraw, silently enduring the toxic environment. This carried on for nearly a year, until I started feeling unwell. A doctor's visit revealed life-changing news. I was pregnant. Nervously, I shared the news with Mark. "I've been feeling sick, so I went to the doctor. I'm pregnant," I told him. "That's amazing. So, I'm going to be a dad. Do we know if it's a boy or a girl yet?" Mark asked, his excitement palpable. "Not yet. Does it matter?" I asked, sensing deeper expectations. "Of course, it matters. It has to be a boy," he said confidently, knowing he was an only child. I realized the pressure was already mounting, for us to have a son to carry on the family legacy. "What if it's a girl?" I asked hesitantly, starting to feel a bit anxious. "Don't worry, I'm sure it's a boy," Mark reassured me, though the confidence in his tone made me uneasy. It was as if he couldn't fathom the possibility of it being otherwise. When we later found out we were having a girl, I was thrilled. The thought of having a daughter filled me with joy. But Mark's reaction was far from what I had hoped. "A girl? Are you sure? Maybe they got it wrong, get it checked again," he said, his voice carrying a hint of disappointment. His reaction left me unsettled, but I was even more anxious about how Linda would take the news. Keeping the pregnancy a secret from them wasn't an option forever. So one evening, Mark finally shared the news with his parents. His father was over the moon. "That's fantastic, Clara, our first grandchild. I'm so happy for you both," he said, genuinely excited. Linda, however, responded with a quiet, disapproving murmur. "A girl, not a boy? Mark needs a son to carry on the family name," she muttered, her disappointment hard to miss. From that moment on, things took a turn for the worse. Linda became even more critical, constantly pressuring me about my responsibilities around the house. She questioned my every move and even started making pointed remarks about whether I planned to quit my job once the baby was born. "Pregnancy isn't an excuse to neglect your duties. Just because you're carrying a child doesn't mean you get to slack off," she said coolly. I was shocked to hear such cold words from another woman, especially one who had gone through pregnancy herself. It was then that I seriously began to wonder if staying in this house was the best decision for my baby. My parents lived about 4 hours away by train. Since my father had passed, my mom and older sister were living together in our family home, offering a refuge far from the suffocating atmosphere of my in-laws' house. I started thinking that going to my parents' home to give birth would be the safest and most supportive option. With a heavy heart, I called my mom. "Mom, it's me, Clara," I said. "What's going on, sweetheart? It's rare for you to call," she replied warmly. "I'm pregnant, and I was wondering if I could come home to give birth." "You're pregnant? Why didn't you tell us sooner? Congratulations, honey. Of course, you can come home, but have you discussed this with your in-laws yet?" she asked, always mindful of doing things the right way. "Not yet," I admitted. "Well, make sure you talk it over with them first. If they're okay with it, then there's no problem," she advised. Encouraged by her words, I brought it up with Mark that evening. "I'm thinking of going to my parents' house for the birth," I said, trying to gauge his reaction. "Oh, going home for the birth? That's fine, I guess," he responded, surprisingly nonchalant. "My mom's here, so everything should be okay." His quick agreement took me off guard, but I knew the real challenge would be getting Linda's approval. I also decided to ask my father-in-law for his thoughts. "I think it would be best if I went to my parents' place for the delivery. What do you think?" I asked him, hoping for his support. He looked a bit surprised but then smiled warmly. "If that's what you want, Clara, then it's probably the best decision. I won't oppose it." With his blessing, I felt a sense of relief. I prepared to leave without expecting any major issues, but on the morning I was set to depart, I woke up to find my packed luggage missing. My heart sank. Mark and his father had already left for work, leaving me alone with Linda. "Do you know where my luggage is?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Oh, that?" I threw it out. Linda sneered. "I don't need a daughter-in-law who stirs up so much trouble. Don't ever come back," she spat, before shoving me out the door. I barely had time to react. Dressed only in my pajamas and without shoes, I found myself locked out with just my phone in hand. Barefoot and shaken, I called my mom. She was furious and promised to come right away. While waiting, I walked to a nearby diner and spent an hour trying to process what had just happened. My mom arrived soon after, and without hesitation, she drove me straight back to our family home, where my sister was already waiting. I explained everything, the cruel treatment from Linda and Mark's lack of support. My mom and sister exchanged quiet, determined words, leaving me wondering what they were planning. The next morning, still at my family home, I went outside to fetch the newspaper. To my shock, there were Linda and Mark kneeling on the doorstep. "Clara, please, I'm so sorry, it's all my fault," Linda pleaded desperately. "Please don't sever ties with my husband's company." "Clara, I'm sorry too," Mark added quickly. "Can we please continue doing business with my dad's company?" I stood there, completely confused. "What are you talking about?" I asked, still trying to understand what they meant. My mom stepped forward, her voice sharp. "What does resuming business mean?" she asked pointedly. To avoid creating a scene, my mom invited them inside. Once seated, Mark began his plea. Would you consider continuing business with my dad's company? He begged, looking at both my mom and sister. I turned to my mom, utterly puzzled. What is this about doing business with his father's company? My mom sighed and explained. We've been working with one of their subsidiaries for years. It's a major company within their group, second only to their main office. Mark added quickly, your mom's company is one of our top clients. I was floored. That's news to me too, I said, chuckling at the absurdity. But my mom's expression turned steely. I can't continue doing business with a family that treats my daughter like this. All business dealings stop immediately, she declared firmly, leaving no room for negotiation. Linda, desperate and visibly shaken, cried out, please, I beg you, I'll do anything, could you reconsider? My sister, wearing a smirk, leaned in and said, you said anything, right? Then you'll agree to Clara's divorce, and naturally, you'll pay alimony and child support. Her words hung in the air like a final verdict. Just a day earlier, Mark had coldly told me that I deserved everything that was happening. His lack of remorse or compassion had cemented my decision. Silently, I nodded in agreement with my sister and mom. Whatever affection I once held for Mark had long since withered away. Thanks to my sister's bold move, the conversation shifted decisively in our favor. Linda, her desperation palpable, finally asked, even if it means agreeing to a divorce, will you resume business? My mom, calm and confident, picked up her phone. It seems this woman agrees to my daughter's divorce, she said into the receiver, her voice clear and resolute. A familiar voice echoed from the other end. It was my father-in-law. Understood, Linda, I'm divorcing you, and Mark, you're fired. The room went silent as the shock of his words settled in. My mom placed the phone down and looked Linda in the eyes. You two treated my daughter horribly. Actions have consequences. The consequences were swift and irreversible. Linda found herself without a husband, and Mark was now jobless, removed from the family business. My father-in-law's influence stretched wide, ensuring that neither Linda nor Mark would find any help within their usual social or professional circles. Mark tried his hand at finding work in his previous field, but doors were closed to him. He eventually took a customer service job, only to be let go due to a slew of complaints. Now, Linda and Mark share a small, cramped one-bedroom apartment. Their once glamorous lifestyle, funded by my father-in-law's wealth, is a distant memory, and their relationship is strained as they struggle to get by on daily wage jobs. As for me, I safely gave birth to a healthy baby girl at my family home, surrounded by the unwavering love and support of my mom and sister. Life has settled into a peaceful rhythm, and I'm planning to join my mom's company, eager to begin a new chapter in my professional journey. Mark hasn't reached out about our daughter, and frankly, I have no desire for him to be part of her life. I expect him to fulfill his legal obligations regarding child support, but as for the rest, I'm moving forward, living a happy, fulfilling life with my little girl, free from the toxic influences that once weighed me down.